Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. We're going to give it a minute here while the screen populates. Thank you for making time for us on this Thursday evening. We have over 100 people joining us for this first day student session, and then a couple hundred for the boarding student session. We have a great group of panelists tonight who are here to answer your questions. And I'd just like to introduce them before we get started. First, I'd like to introduce Associate Headmaster Sylvia Rodriguez-Vargas. Sylvia has begun her work at Hill on July 1st, and we're delighted to have her. She's coming to you live from Pottstown. We have our Medical Director, Dr. Kristen Spencer, who is currently, I believe, in Indiana, and she's been hard at work no matter where she is. We're also joined by our Academic Dean, Katie Hudak, who will be able to answer some of your academic questions. Ari Baum, our Dean of Students, who is in Nevada, where he says it's over 107 degrees. Tom Eccleston, our Assistant Headmaster for Enrollment Management, is in Pottstown. I think, and then last but certainly not least, we have Donna Eilberg, our Day Student Dean, joining us from Rhode Island. We have about an hour and 15 minutes tonight. And we're excited to spend some time with you. We're really excited about the upcoming year. We're excited to welcome our students back to campus and our faculty back to campus, all of which is happening just in the next few weeks, really. The year ahead, as you've seen in all of our communications, and certainly as you've seen in just about every media report, is going to be unique. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be different, and it's going to be productive. It's going to be a great school year. Our students are going to learn, our faculties are going to develop relationships with our students, we're going to have lots of great school activities, and we're going to have a historic 170th year at the Hill. As you've read the plan, and I know it's a long plan, over 50 pages, as I've mentioned in my intro letter to all of you, the plan is a big compromise. Everyone is putting forth different efforts, different contributions, making changes and modifications to their expectations. And it really aligns well with the famous words from our school song, the back of each, the strength of all. And so this is a year when we will really understand what it means to give back and give to each other. No plan is foolproof. Despite our plan being 52 pages long and having months and months of careful guidance and work, it's not foolproof. There's no 100% guarantee around COVID-19. But what we've done is we've created a multi-layered approach with a lot of different mitigation strategies, a lot of different safeguarding efforts. And we hope that by layering those one on top of the other, that we've created the safest, healthiest, and most effective plan that we can. And we've relied on the best guidance both inside the Hill School and outside the Hill School. And the last thing I want to say here is that almost every question that's been raised in advance of this, and almost every question that might be raised tonight, could probably be answered by saying, we're opening the school amidst the global pandemic. We all wish that we weren't. We all wish that we were back to normal, and we hope that we'll get there at some point. But we all have to recognize that it just can't be normal right now. And so while I do plan to offer other answers other than we're opening amidst a global pandemic, I do hope that you keep that in the back of your mind, that is a really challenging environment. And I'm really grateful to our team, to our faculty, to our staff, and to all of you for sticking with us through this period, for all of your helpful suggestions and questions and support. To give you a sense of tonight, I first want to just make the disclaimer that all of our plans remain subject to change. I think it's exactly 6:05. So this is our best thinking as of 6:05 p.m. on July 23rd. I'm sure all of you are aware things are changing hourly. sometimes faster than that in terms of the landscape in our country, around the world with respect to COVID-19. And just when we think we have something figured out, things change. And we appreciate your flexibility, and I hope you appreciate our agility as a school to respond to those changes. So it's a good time to stay on top of your email, on top of social media for the Hills School, be visiting our website, be visiting CDC website, and we will certainly notify you of any significant changes. But I just want you to make sure you're aware of that. I'm going to start with what I'm calling my top 10 list today, and that is basically the top 10 parts of our plan, the most important parts of our plan, especially those that have changed over the course of the last month or so, since you may have been on a Headmaster's Roundtable or been on our FAQ page or our website. As I said, a lot of things have changed, and I want to make sure you're aware of them and the rationale behind them. We've gathered all of your questions in advance. We received a lot of questions in advance. We've tried to collect them and organize them. And I'm going to try to address all the questions that were asked in advance. There were obviously some duplicates, and there were some questions that were really personal to individual situations, and we tried to respond to those separately. I would ask that you wait until we get to the Q&A. It'll be very obvious when that happens. You'll see the screen before you post questions in the Q&A box. Linda Hamilton-Kirk, who's our Chief Strategy Officer, is sort of the wizard behind the curtain who's going to be working on those questions and organizing them as they come up. She may answer them, she may direct you to a part of our plan or one of our FAQs, or she may allow those questions to be answered live. And we'll use our entire panel to try to answer those questions as well as the questions in the presentation. We may not get to all the questions tonight. Possibly we'll run out of time. Possibly they're more personal, or in some cases, they're answered very clearly in our plan or on our FAQs, which have been updated. And in that event, you may just be referred to that. We want to make the best use of our time tonight. But any questions that aren't answered during this, we will send an email directly to you and we'll update our FAQs. There is a feature when you're asking questions where you can click on asking the questions anonymously. While that's fine to use, we won't be able to follow up with you if you ask a question anonymously. And I promise you, we won't hold anything against anyone for asking a tough question or a question we don't even have the answer for. So if you use the anonymous function, just know that we won't necessarily be able to get back to you directly. We may add an answer to our FAQs. And then I do welcome you to stay on. Well, you actually have to sign off and sign back on to attend the boarding student Headmaster's Roundtable at 7:30 p.m. There will be a lot of repetition, but some of you may have a day student and a boarding student, or you're interested in what the guidelines are for boarding students, or you want to hear, just want to hear us for another hour and a half. But you're welcome to sign off and sign back on for that. So without further ado, let's go to our top 10 list. I feel a little bit like David Letterman. Hopefully some of the parents in the room will get that. These aren't in any particular order. One of the concepts that we adopted way back in, I think, April, was this notion of a campus wellness level grid. And you can see this laid out here from alpha to echo. And we also have actually have a sixth category called opening conditions, which I'll show in just a moment. You know, the hope is that we will eventually get to Bravo, and then perhaps in the spring or in the fall, next fall, be back in alpha. But we're likely to be in the Charlie and Delta range throughout the year, or at least throughout the autumn session. And we're really trying to avoid echo. And really everything we're doing is to avoid being in Delta and echo. And so I hope you'll keep that in mind, because that's once we get to Delta and echo, the restrictions become really onerous, and we're trying to avoid that. You most certainly cannot read this chart right now, but it is available in our plan. And I encourage you to go to the campus wellness level grid. It has most of the major aspects of student life listed here on the left, and then the corresponding behaviors and practices that will follow across the board in those conditions. And you can also see on the far right in gray are our opening conditions, which we believe will last for approximately 2 to 3 weeks into early September. We know that that's the most important time to create a healthy baseline for our community, and so we're taking extra precautions during that period. We certainly will move out of that as quickly as we can, and the campus wellness level will be reported daily to our students and weekly to parents, also with corresponding behaviors and practices that go along with it. This is a little bit more detail on our opening conditions that we're anticipating. Again, subject to change. Every aspect of this is subject to change. We do intend to be in person in our classrooms with full 6-foot physical distancing. Masks are required for all students and faculty. And there will be, we're providing eyewear for students and faculty to be used in certain circumstances, mostly in small group work when students turn and face each other. You'll be provided, the students will be provided the eyewear at registration when they come to campus. For opening conditions, all of our dining will be manual buffet. That means that you'll be served, the students will be served at different stations. There'll be staggered meal times, there'll be designated seating, and there'll be a lot of outdoor and tented options as well. As of right now, our athletics and training will begin in a training and skill building mode with teams, but within those teams, students will be assigned to our flocks, which I'm going to get to in a minute, which is 4 students that they'll stick together with, and there'll also be physical distancing and outdoor activities as much as possible wherever feasible. Our day students will be expected to arrive on campus on class days at 8 a.m. And they'll be departing before dinner at the end of their co-curricular commitment. We're asking, students are not allowed to use district busing, and we ask that if they are carpooling, that they're wearing masks during the carpool and doing their best to physical distance within the car, and they're allowed on campus on class days only. There are other co-curricular programs, of course, beyond our athletic program. Those two will begin in small groups in these flocks that I've mentioned, and there'll be physical distancing and appropriate masking used during that. There will be no parent campus visits during opening conditions for day or boarding students. We will hopefully move to parent visits towards the end of September. Our dormitory students will also be interacting in droves. That's 2 students, that's roommates, with physical distancing. The dormitory is a really high-risk area, and we're trying to, again, start with a really healthy baseline. Masks and eyewear will be required as directed in classrooms and in other settings. There are no campus leaves for our boarding students during that time. We will allow for food delivery on campus on weekends to the CFTA parking lot for our boarding students. We will have some activities and gatherings, but they'll be limited to 25 students maximum with physical distancing and only outdoors. So there'll be no large indoor gatherings other than our meals and classes. We may have some admission visitors in the early part of the year. They'll only interact with adults on our admission team, and they'll be wearing their personal protective equipment, and they won't be going inside any buildings at all. The second thing on my top 10 list here is just a reminder of the pre-arrival quarantine and testing protocol. You can see here the dates of the various quarantine periods. Everyone in our community is quarantining. Our faculty is quarantining, our day students are quarantining, our boarding students, domestic, are quarantining, and our international students are quarantining. And for each of those groups, it's different. For day students, since you're close to campus, we're asking that you quarantine at home. And there's pretty specific quarantine expectations that are listed in our plan. I ask you to please review them. I don't really want to spend a lot of time going over it here. And there have been some questions, but it's a strict quarantine. This is not a time for going to large family gatherings. It's not a time to go into stores. It's not a time to play club sports. It's not a time to go to church or other large gatherings like that. So please, we're asking parents and students to really honor that expectation. As far as the testing protocol goes, and Kristen can chime in here as well, Dr. Spencer, But this is a very, very fluid situation. We had a great testing protocol lined up a month ago, 6 weeks ago, and then a number of things have happened, as I'm sure you're reading. First, there's been large increases in COVID-19 all around the country. And since many of the testing facilities are centralized, the wait time for these have gotten longer. The second is that the devices that we and other organizations were using for this have basically been commandeered by the US Department of Health and Human Services for other purposes. And so all I can tell you is we're gonna have more information for you within the next week. We have asked as much as possible for students to arrange for their own testing through their primary care physician, through an urgent care facility, or through another facility locally, and just present us with that information. So the dates for that are all explained. If you cannot arrange for your own testing, we will have something in place. We just don't know exactly what that is, but we hope to have that answer to you within the next week or so. Kristen, did I miss anything there?
I think those are the highlights. I am working to partner with a couple, one of two small laboratories that has a more rapid turnaround time than the main commercial labs. And that's been one of the sticking points. So as we have those conversations and get closer to that solution, we'll be able to update you with the mechanics of how that testing will actually unfold for you.
So, so thank you for your patience and flexibility, everybody. But we think that this is a really important part of entering the campus safely. During the quarantine, students will be using WAIVE, which is our normal student location app. It's been modified over the summer by our Hill alumni who built the program to do twice daily symptom checking. And that'll be pretty straightforward, and you'll get an email about that. Students will have a general sense of how to use it, and they'll be using it all year. One major change that's happened in the last month or so, since we probably all last spoke, was a change to a modified block schedule for the autumn session, at least. Some of you have, your children have participated in block schedules at other schools. There aren't many boarding schools that operate a block schedule normally, but a number of schools have moved to this. I hope you noticed in our plan that we hired 2 Cornell professors to run a study on the various group settings on campus and how they may or may not mathematically contribute to the spread or the non-spread of COVID-19 on a residential campus. And one of the most impactful ways of reducing the potential spread of COVID-19 was found to be reducing the number of classrooms and groups of classmates that students interact with on a daily basis. And so we made the decision to shift to a block schedule where a student is at maximum carrying 3 classes or 4 classes at a time in a 3-period day. Our normal schedule, as most of you know, who have returning students, is a 7-period day with some longer periods on Wednesdays and Thursdays. But if you do the math and there's 12 students in a classroom and you interact with them with 7 of those classes, or between 5 and 7, you're interacting with a lot of students and the exposure is high. And if a student is confirmed for COVID-19, all of those close contacts will be in question. And so we made the decision for 2 reasons. 1, as I just mentioned, about exposure, and 2, given the amount of anxiety and stress that's already existing in pretty much for every person on the planet, but certainly for young people and students, we wanted to reduce the workload and the stress load of carrying somewhere between 5 and 7 classes at any given time, and also for our teachers. So students at Hill take between 5 and 7 classes, and so we had to devise a block schedule that was a little bit odd and even. We have a 3-block rotation and then a 4-block rotation. So as you can see on this schedule, in the fall term part 1, students will only be taking 3 of their up to 7 courses. And they'll take those 3 courses for 18 straight class days, including 1 Saturday on September 5th, And that will equate to the same amount of classroom time as if they were taking those classes in a 7-period over the entire term. So they will complete those three classes during part 1 of the block schedule. They will then shift to take 4 classes or up to 4 classes for a 24-day rotation, but only 3 of them on any given day, 2 before lunch, 1 after lunch, and 2 Saturdays. At the end of that period, they will have now completed between 5 and 7 full fall term courses at the 8-week mark, which is represented there by yellow, at which point there'll be a long weekend on campus, and then we'll shift to the winter term, which starts much earlier this year, and it's the same rotation again. So the students will take their 3 classes for the first part, and then their other up to 4 classes between November 11th and December 18th. And just a reminder here that the last sort of 2.5 weeks of the winter term part 2 will be remote for everyone. That's from Thanksgiving until the winter holiday recess. So I hope that's clear. To give you a sense of the actual daily schedule, this is the 3-block 18-day rotation. You can see here that students would have their A, B, and C classes in a rotating 3-day schedule, and it would just return to day 1 when they get through the first rotation, and they'll do this for 18 days. And so you can see that some of the class, the order changes each day, and that's so that our remote learners, especially our international remote learners, don't miss the same period every day after lunch. You can see that there's staggered meal times. There's advisory and chapel time that's built in. There's transition and snack time after the last class. There's plenty of time in the afternoon for afternoon activities, and so on and so forth into the evening. So they'll do this twice in the autumn. And then this is a similar, because we have an odd number of classes, we had to do a 4-block rotation, and it takes longer because you're still only taking 3 classes a day. You'd have your DEF periods here. And so you'd go for 24 class days, including a few Saturdays. But same basic schedule. So students will get used to the sort of times of the day and the bell schedule and all of that. I've got to say, the thing I'm enjoying most about the new plan is our shepherding system. As the Hill Rams, we wanted to come up with something clever to describe our cohorting model and our physical distancing model. And we came up with shepherding because we're rams. So we have this cute, fuzzy little ram here. We'll have a contest to name him. And you can see there are 3 different group sizes. There's the drove, which is two people, 2 rams. There's a flock, which is 4 rams. And then there's a herd, which is, roughly speaking, 10 to 12 students. And these will be the same groupings over and over again. So if you're obviously your roommate or your lab partner, you will stay with that person to minimize exposure and to minimize potential close contact and quarantining. Same with a flock. If you have a 4-person grouping on your athletics team to practice skills, you'll stay with that 4-person group. And if we are in herds, like a herd would be like a classroom or maybe a dorm floor, or perhaps a co-curricular group, that will be a larger group, maybe 12, 10 to 15, something in that range. So you're going to see a lot of this little fuzzy little sheep in my presentation and throughout the year. And I hope at least we can smile from time to time and enjoy some aspects of our time together. You've all, I'm sure, seen that we are asking all students and employees to sign a community health compact and also a waiver. As I mentioned before, this only works if we're all in it together, back of each, the strength of all. And we're asking for some pretty strict compliance here. And we're asking students and families and employees to live up to that. Whatsoever things are true are the other famous words at Hill. And this is a major expectation of our students and faculty. And then also the waiver As I explained before, there is risk in opening our school live. We're doing everything we can to minimize that risk, but we want to make sure that everyone is fully aware of that as well. These two documents you're expected to sign these before returning to campus. They're available in my backpack, along with other forms, including you'll soon get the student handbook and the acknowledgement of the student handbook. But there's some other forms there as well. So if you haven't figured out how to use my backpack, please contact our academic office and they can help you with that. The calendar has stayed roughly the same since our early plans, but just as a reminder here, we have this arrival period really starting in the next week or two with international students and distant borders arriving on campus or to a hotel near campus on August 5th. Classes begin on August 24th. We're calling the combination of the fall and winter terms the autumn session, and that will run from August 24th through December 18th with that short period of remote learning for all. We have the Thanksgiving recess before that and the winter holiday recess after that. And the period starting after the autumn session we're calling hibernation. Unfortunately, rams and sheep do not hibernate, but there was really no good word for this. So we were trying to be descriptive and illustrative of what we're trying to accomplish, which is really reduce the density on our campus. This will be a period of time where limited to varsity winter athletes if they're safely able to compete and cannot find competition in another season as a team, and also some international students who are unable to go home or to their host families. During this time, we couldn't be more excited about the H-term. Ellen Dietrich and several other faculty members and trustees have been working around the clock to develop a really robust program that's based form by form. It is not required, but it's highly, highly encouraged for all students. If a student has extenuating circumstances, they can petition to be out of the H-term. Also, students can petition to do an independent program, either in lieu of the H-term or in addition to the H-term. And we'll be getting out a lot more information about the H-term to you in the next few weeks and throughout the fall. Any student who is on campus, either the winter varsity athletes or the international students, cannot opt out of the H-term, in case you were wondering. We then have our early spring recess, the yellow block there after the H-term. We may, depending on how things go, we may need to use that as part of the athletic season. It may be part of a return to campus, staggered return. We're obviously hopeful that come late February, that conditions around the country, around the world are much better, and that we can arrive more closely to normal as we would at the end of a spring break. And then we have the longer spring term, which begins on March 1st. It's 14 weeks long. And one of the things just to be aware of, I didn't mention it before with the block schedule, but I'll mention it here, is that we've been very thoughtful, our academic team has been very thoughtful in that if things are better in the spring and we're not as worried about close contact, and we think that it's in our best interest, we can move back to a fully rotating 7-period schedule. We would still be in smaller class sizes and still in our designated classrooms, but we don't necessarily have to stay with a block schedule. So I wanted to make you aware of that. That's one of the sort of hidden gems in our plan. Other schools that have gone to block schedule did not do that. And so some students are taking an AP class, let's say in the fall only. They complete the class in the fall, and then they're not preparing for the AP exam, which will still fall in the spring. So there's a lot of scrambling and review at that point. One other thing to mention about the hibernation, during the H-term itself, students will receive assignments from their normal teachers, weekly assignments for review and maintenance. And certainly in the most advanced classes, students will be asked to stay current and continue reviewing so as to not slide back before the spring term begins, because it's a pretty long break. The area of our plan, perhaps other than testing or pre-arrival testing, that I think still has the most uncertainty in it are our co-curricular programs, and especially our athletic programs. There's just a lot of rapidly changing information. It's not something we can necessarily decide on our own because we compete with other schools and interact with other schools and leagues. We compete across state lines, and every state, as you all know, is very different. And we aren't 100% sure what can be done safely, and even if the sport itself is safe, can we travel? Do we want to expose our students to all of that? We're working really hard. I know Seth Eilberg has been getting a lot of questions about this, but these are our current options. They're subject to change in each term. As you can see, the winter is only for varsity athletes this year. And the dates and times and nature of everything is still up for grabs. What I can tell you is that no matter what, we will continue to offer all of these things for students to continue training and practicing. And we may offer other alternatives that aren't on this list in the event that there's no interscholastic competition or we have to make some other changes due to the campus wellness level. So there will be lots to do in the afternoons and to be done safely. We are continuously talking to our league peer schools and other peer schools, and we hope to have an update, if not in August and early September. As of right now, all interscholastic competition is suspended through, I think it's August 8th or August 9th, excuse me, September 8th or September 9th. And we hope that if we can go forward safely, that we will. But I do just caution you to be realistic about this. We need to be safe and we need to be thoughtful, and a lot of it is out of our hands. So here you see our furry little friend back. This is our sort of our safeguarding and health brand for the year. At Hill, we wash our hands. At Hill, we wear masks. At Hill, we wear eyewear. At Hill, we are physically distant. At Hill, we respect the health of others, and so on and so forth. So you'll see the signage around. Some of the key aspects of the At Hill mantra, of course, will be masks, will be eyewear, and we'll provide different types of eyewear if students wear eyeglasses over the OTG eyewear. We will physically distance. We will wash our hands and sanitize our hands a lot. And I'm really pleased that we've been able to develop 2 contact tracing systems. One is phone-based and it's called Trace Innovations. It's an app on the smartphone. And one is wristband. So every student, every employee, every visitor to our campus will be issued one or both of these. Students will certainly get both of them. And basically the way it works is the cell phone, you'll have this Trace Innovations app running in the background, and that will notify Hill in the event that someone is test positive for COVID-19. We can run a report and determine who has been within 6 feet of a positive case for 15 minutes or more, or whatever the guidance is at that time. It's been sort of going up and down between 10 and 15 minutes. The wristbands are similar, but you don't have to have your phone with you. Within the wristband, there's a Bluetooth disc, which sends out a signal, and it works with our Wi-Fi, and we've expanded our Wi-Fi coverage, and it also has accurate readings within 6 feet. And so we'll use these in addition to manual contact tracing and an interview of the student, as well as working with the Department of Public Health for Montgomery County. So we've invested a lot in this technology and have found 2 really good partners for that as well. On an ongoing basis, we will be continuously screening every member of our community on a daily basis. And for day students, they will screen before they leave home, which is a series of symptom questions on WAIVE, as well as taking their temperature. So if you don't have a thermometer at home, it's time to get one, and time to teach students how to use them. And I hope parents will help them with that if needed. If you're clear to leave home, WAIVE will tell you so, and you'll arrive on campus. All day students will arrive through the CFTA parking lot this year, where we will be installing a large tent, our welcome tent. Within that tent, there are, I think there are 4 of these kiosks that are shown here, the HIK Vision kiosks. It does facial recognition, it will take your temperature, make sure you're allowed to proceed onto campus, and you'll go forward. In the event of illness or close contact, for day students, we will ask you to stay at home and participate remotely and follow the appropriate rules around isolation and quarantine, which are slightly different. And you'll be, if that does occur for you or your child, you'll be given that kind of information from our wellness center. We also, for day students, if you are sick at home, you'll be referred to your primary care physician, and you'll follow that person's, that physician's instructions, and also coordinate with the wellness center. I will say that it's going to be a complicated year because given the speed of testing across the country right now, we're going to have to be very cautious with pretty much any respiratory illness, coughs, sniff, runny nose, those kinds of things are going to, we're going to have to ask students to stay at home when they're ill, as to not until we can confirm one way or another whether they have COVID-19. So I know that it's going to be frustrating from time to time, and we appreciate your patience and flexibility, and I hope you understand that it's in everyone's best interest to do that. And number 10, lastly, is the day student experience. And I've sort of covered this, and we'll be talking about that with your questions in just a few minutes. But as I mentioned before, the morning protocol is the at-home symptom screening, another screening 30 minutes before classes begin at the CFTA parking lot. You'll have your academic day, the 3-class block rotation with lunch and chapel and advisor rotation in there. Afternoon time is, if you have free time, there'll be a designated day student area during free periods, most likely Ryan Library, and then you'll attend your afternoon activity. For what it's worth, boarding students also have designated areas during their free periods, primarily their dorm rooms. And so we just are really trying to prevent unstructured, unsupervised time on campus, and we hope that our students will put that to good use. Right now, we're asking day students to depart campus after their last afternoon commitment before dinner, and then all extra help sessions in the evening for both day students and boarding students will be conducted online with teachers or peer tutors or fellows. So you can make an appointment for that. There'll be open office hours, and everyone will be participating in the same way, at least to start the year. Without further ado, I'm going to get into the questions that were submitted beforehand. The first question, the first group of questions are around schedule and academics, and I'm going to ask Katie Hudak to answer this first question, which is, how will the transition from one block rotation to another work in terms of coverage and review?
Yes, so the coverage, because our classes are 80 minutes long, the coverage is really going to be, as Zach mentioned earlier, about the same as a normal class. Our teachers are getting a lot of professional development around how to present the material in a different way, how to break up that time in a way that is helpful to students and best for that kind of learning. And we're fortunate in that block scheduling is nothing new. It's been around for about 20 years. So the content for most of us will remain the same. The review is going to be a little bit different. As Zach, I think, mentioned, the early learners of languages, world languages and classics, will have some maintenance work and review work, even in their off rotations. But no other classes will be permitted to give work during those off rotations, so the students can really focus on the classes that they are taking in that rotation. we felt it was really important for students to be able to fully focus on the classes at hand. They are going to be more intense. So we felt it was important to do that. So teachers will have to pick up during the next rotation with a quick review and making sure that students are, you know, remembering where they left off. I can't remember if Zach said it tonight or if it was, or if I read it in the report, but there is going to be a clean break at the end of the rotation. So we are working right now to help teachers figure out how to create modules and create units that do have a nice clean ending, and then start with a quick review before the next rotation begins.
Thanks, Katie. The next question, will the modified block schedule be used in the spring? I've already answered that question. We're not sure yet. We've left our options open to either continue with the block schedule if we think that's still necessary, or that we all love it, or revert back to our normal schedule. And so that's a nice advantage in our program. The next question was, will day students and boarders be together in classes? The answer to that is absolutely yes. I've received a number of questions which seemed like that we would be separating day students and boarders throughout the day and that there wouldn't be any opportunity to interact. And that's just simply not the case. Day students and boarders will interact in their classroom. They'll interact at lunch with their advisory, with their chapel group. They'll interact in their co-curricular programs. They'll interact in other ways as well. But as I've said, we also have to maintain separation for all students during unstructured time. And so, but we certainly, the classes will be a mix of boarders, day students, and remote learners as well. Okay. Those were the only academic questions that were submitted, Katie, in advance, but I'm sure there will be more. So we're now moving on to some of the student community life questions, which there were a lot of. Please explain the restriction on club sports and outside activities for all students. Can that be reconsidered? Can day students play club sports during quarantine? This was certainly among the most popular questions and one of the most challenging decisions we had to make. In the end, we've looked at this pretty hard, and we just don't have a high level of confidence in club sports and outside activities in terms of the levels of precaution and testing and screening and follow-up that they're taking, as well as the nature of many of these kinds of activities as being high opportunities for spreading COVID-19. As a result, we made the decision that club sports are at this point, and we will continue to review it, but that club sports cannot be played by either boarding students or day students. And the same goes for other outside activities that are comparable: dance recitals, Boy Scouts. We really discourage going to religious services live. Those are considered super spreader events in many cases, especially where they're singing. And we encourage you to do that virtually. But anything that's a large gathering, even a large family gathering or party of some kind, we really, it's as part of our health compact, we just aren't allowing that. We will, as I said, we will reconsider that throughout the year. We know this is important to everyone, but at this point, it's not permitted. And for the same reasons, we are not allowing day students to play club sports during quarantine, and we hope that you'll respect that as well. Next question. Will there be any modifications to the dress code? Mr. Baum, can you take this one?
Sure, thank you. On one hand, I think a lot of the necessary changes that need to be made right now, you know, they're daunting for all of us. I guess my feeling, and I think a lot of my colleagues feel, that the things that we don't need to change, we want to preserve, so we can preserve the things that make Hill what it is for our students and faculty. That said, that one particular exception, I think, with the dress code is that we're, of course, starting earlier than we would in a normal year, and we would reasonably expect temperatures to be higher. So there will be a more lax dress code without no blazer, shorts allowed that are khaki shorts or something like that. We'll put out more details about what a relaxed dress code could be for higher temperatures that we expect, but that will range. If we come back August 24th to classes and it's 60 degrees, it'll be what we think of as regular dress code. I don't expect it'll be quite that cool on the 24th, but it would sure be nice if it were. So that will be kind of like a day-to-day, week-to-week thing the first few weeks of the year that we'll be posting dress code modifications for students as the temperatures dictate.
For the return, Mr. Baum, for the returning students and parents on the call, it'll be something comparable to academic casual with shorts.
Yeah, so I'm putting a letter out, just part of our August mailing, that's going to be specific to what the modified dress code for heat purposes will be, and I think that comes out in the next couple of weeks.
Great. The next question is, how will the school prevent students from congregating in large groups during free time? I've addressed a little bit of that, but Mr. Baum, if you would respond to that as well.
Yeah, it's such a good question, Zach, because I think it's actually captured in a lot of ways for probably the day student population in particular, because they're of course leaving campus each day and are going to be home on weekends as well. We need families, day student and boarding families, to do their best to meet the standards that we're asking of them. That's our best chance at the school being as healthy and as safe as possible during such a dynamic time. So to literally answer the question, we're not going to be knocking on your door, I don't think, to be like, we heard that there's a big family gathering here tonight. We're asking families to do their best to do what we're asking, and the more families are able to do in this area, as difficult as it may be, the better chance we have at being successful.
Mr. Baum, I think the question is also related to free time on campus.
Oh yeah, sorry. For some reason I saw like home in there. Yeah, so the answer is similar, I think, on campus, but active supervision is a term that Zach used earlier. There's not very many circumstances under which there isn't active supervision during normal times, but we've done our best to even reduce further when that happens. So you might see, like during the academic day, during normal times, there are places around campus, the student center, the grill, where students can convene, and there are adults around, but there's not what we would consider to be active supervision specific to physical distancing, mask wearing, and a couple of the other standards that Zach has mentioned. So the best way that will prevent students from congregating during their free time is by not limiting free time, but limiting the amount of places students, boarders, or day students can be during those periods of time.
And we're also adding a lot of signage around campus in terms of seating areas and the dining hall and other hallways and stairwells, which will help with this as well.
It's a funny thing, Zach, just, and I'll mention this quickly, it's in a way not different than almost anything we ever ask. The best chance we have is if students are their own best coaches, even as many signs as we'll put around and as active as the adults will be, we'll be as clear as we can with students about our expectations. And we trust the students at this school, returning and new, to do what we ask so that the community can be as safe and healthy as possible.
Thanks, Ari. So a big question has been, why can't day students have breakfast and dinner in the dining hall? This is the way we're opening the year. If things change with our campus wellness level, we'll review this. But the rationale here is that there are a lot of restrictions right now, as I'm sure you've seen in Pennsylvania, on the number of individuals that can gather in a dining facility. And so we have to keep a very close eye on our capacity at this time, as well as the exposure challenge that we have. And breakfast and dinner are also a time when our residential employees visit the dining hall, which they don't do during lunch. So faculty families and other residential faculty who don't normally go to lunch do go to breakfast and dinner. And so we have to maintain that balance. Breakfast and dinner has never been required of day students. And it's been a courtesy that we've extended to day student families over the years. And at this point, it's just not practical or feasible given what we're trying to accomplish in keeping the campus safe. But lunch, certainly lunch is required. And we expect all day students to be at lunch at their assigned time and location.
Zach, if you don't mind, I just wanted to add quickly to that.
Sure.
I think especially to start, because we're doing a lot of this for the first time as well, the way Headmaster Lehman described it earlier, the manual buffet, that's very time consuming. We're trying to get students through because we'll have to do multiple shifts. And at least to start, by not having day students at breakfast and dinner, we feel like we'll have a better gauge on being able to have all of our boarding students eat in the timely manner that we need them to, so that the day functions as needed. It could go way faster than we expect, in which case, maybe we will be able to make some adjustments in this area.
And I'll also mention that we have restricted the number of employees that can eat in the dining hall at any time. Typically our staff and non-residential faculty eat in the dining hall for lunch, and we've eliminated that as well. So we're spreading this challenge around to our entire community. Before I turn it over to Donna Albert to answer this question, I just want to wish Mr. Baum happy birthday. He likes to keep it a secret, but today's his birthday, and I know he's always wanted to be on a Zoom call on his birthday, or 2 Zoom calls on his birthday. So good job, Mr. Baum. So Donna, if you're there, how will day students develop relationships with boarders, and I think also with each other?
That's a great question. It's something I've heard from a lot of parents over the past few weeks. And I think, as Zach referred earlier, day students will be in classes with boarders. You will have your advisory, that's a mix of day students and boarding students. You'll have your co-curricular. Certainly some of our weekend activities will have to be remote, not only for our day students, our remote learners. I did a cooking class the other day, which was really fun, and I thought that would be a great way to keep the day students connected over the weekend. So I think between all of those, day students will definitely have plenty of opportunity to interact and meet boarders. Day students will also be assigned a day student prefect. That will be another small advisory, another group. Granted, those will be all day students, but another group of students that day students can connect with.
And for new day students, we've been doing some of that online engagement over the summer with boarders. So that I know a lot of day students have already gotten to know others. But I think, as I shared in my letter to day families, this might take a little bit longer than normal. And you may have, it may take longer to develop these relationships with boarders, with day students, and with faculty. But I refer back to my initial statement, which is, we're trying to do this in a global pandemic. And I think that's a realistic compromise there as well. Okay, next question. Will day student restrictions be modified based on the CWL? And I can answer that, but the answer is yes. The CWL applies to boarding students, day students, employees, everything. So if we escalate, it's going to apply to everyone. And if we de-escalate, which we hope we do by keeping a healthy campus and by the world around us doing a good job too, we will reduce the restrictions like some of the ones we've talked about. And those, we have a formula for how we do that. We work closely with our medical team, and then Dr. Spencer and I review outside data as well as on-campus data, and that's how we are able to make that work. Can day students participate in weekend activities? Donna, you addressed it a little bit, but can you talk about this a little bit more?
Sure. So to start school, we're not having day students come to campus on non-school days. So that would mean on weekends, our on-campus activities are going to be limited to the boarding students. And as Zach mentioned, even our on-campus activities are going to have to be limited in number and type of activity. That being said, I've been speaking with Mr. Hoffman and Mr. Genikis, and activities that day students can participate in remotely is certainly on their mind and in their planning. So there will be activities for day students. And like several of us have said, as campus wellness levels improve, we're hoping that we can potentially make modifications to day students' ability to come to campus on the weekends.
Thank you, Donna. Why are parent visits to campus allowed later in the fall? This was a longer question, but it basically was, you know, if we're not allowing parent visits originally, why would we allow them later? And this is for boarding student parents only. And they're short visits. They're 2 to 3 hours long. They're outdoors. They're fully masked. Parents have to complete the health survey before arriving on campus and temperature screening. And they can only interact with their child or children and not with other children. So we you know, realistically, we just didn't feel that we could operate a campus where students couldn't see their parents indefinitely. And so this is a you know, a challenge, and we hope to do that in the safest way possible. If our campus wellness level increases, then these will be reduced, and likewise, if it decreases, we'll allow these more frequently. And the same goes for why are admission visits allowed on campus. These are very limited visits. They're only interacting with adults, at least in our upper campus wellness levels. So adults there won't be student tour guides. They won't be going inside any building. They'll be physically distanced. They'll be wearing contact tracing. They'll be wearing masks and eyewear as well. So, you know, we don't know what the frequency of admission visits are going to be in the upcoming year. But you know, we do want to continue to bring great students to campus, and we'll be doing a lot of virtual work as well. And certainly if the campus wellness level increases, we will have to change that. Okay, when will winter sports begin? Can winter varsity athletes come home for Thanksgiving and holiday recess? As I shared before, we don't know when winter sports will begin. It's sort of trending towards, if we can proceed safely, towards after the winter holiday recess. That's what we're seeing from other schools who are making changes at this point, or other leagues. So my best estimate is that that's when it would start in terms of having students remain on campus. There will be tryouts in November, early November, before the Thanksgiving recess. And so in all likelihood, winter varsity athletes will be able to come home for Thanksgiving and or the holiday recess. Will day students live on campus during hibernation if they are varsity winter athletes? The answer to that is yes. All of our students who are on winter varsity sports will be expected to live on campus, and we'll be doing team-based dorms, and we're hoping to be in single rooms throughout campus. As I mentioned, we may also have international students still on campus at that point who are unable to go home or to their host family, and those students will either be somehow connected to the winter varsity teams as managers, or maybe as athletes, of course, or they may be in their own international student dorm. And again, everyone who's on campus during the hibernation will also be participating in the H-term. Will student athletes train and have team practices if the fall season is canceled or postponed? Yes, as I mentioned before, all student athletes will continue to train with their teams and develop their skills, physical strength, conditioning, teamwork. They'll have practices regardless of whether the interscholastic season is canceled or postponed. Of course, students can, if by canceling a season or postponing a season, they want to do a different activity, they can switch. And as I mentioned, also, we may be adding new activities, both athletic and non-athletic. If day students must shift to remote learning because of the CWL, will they be permitted to come to campus and train and practice? So this is if the CWL goes to Delta, or certainly if it goes to Echo. Under Delta, we won't be able to have group training or practices. It will only be individual sort of exercise and fitness at that point. So the answer to this is no. If students are remote, they won't be able to come to campus to train or practice. They can do that on their own at home. It'll be the same kind of thing that our students are doing on campus, individual work. We have a lot of hockey families in the crowd tonight. Can Hill put the hockey rink ice down earlier in the fall? I was on a call today with Coach Bala on this, and Mr. Baum is also our head girls hockey coach. The answer to this is we will do our best. We are not a year-round hockey rink because of the way the rink was built. The roof is not insulated and our cooling system is not designed for year-round use. Typically, we get the rink down sometime in October. We may try to get it down a week or two early if we can, but it's not possible to have it unless, as Mr. Baum said, it's 60 degrees in August and holding steady. I don't think we can do that. Mr. Baum, do you want to add anything to the hockey rink ice being down?
In a normal year, it's down, early to mid-October. So I think that's still a good portion of the fall, but hopefully it'll be sooner.
Great, thanks. Oops, sorry, I missed one. Can day students work out in the weight room early in the morning or during a free period? I spoke with Mr. Eilberg about this question earlier today. We are working to figure out a way to allow this to happen at some point in the fall. We don't expect that this will happen during opening conditions. As I said before, we're really trying to establish a healthy baseline and get our day students used to arriving at 8 o'clock and going through the screening process. We are working on additional supervision and additional time for screening and how that might work with breakfast for early morning. You might be able to bring your own breakfast if we can accomplish that. And we are trying to make it available, the weight room available during free periods under a lot of supervision and protocols like we would use at any time in the weight room. And that is because we actually want to spread out the use of the weight room throughout the day because we have limits on capacity in our fitness center. Dr. Spencer, we're moving on to health and wellness. And the question is, what is the status of COVID-19 in Pottstown? And if classes were to start today, and we weren't in opening conditions, I guess, what CWL would we be in today?
So Pottstown has been relatively spared of COVID, at least as far as the publicly reported numbers through the Montgomery County Office of Public Health. We've had 169 cases reported with only 3 deaths. That's in comparison to a pretty heavy activity in Montgomery County. Most of that is down in Lower Merion, Norristown, some of those areas closer to Philadelphia, where there have been over 9,000 cases total since the start of the pandemic, with just over 800 deaths for the county. So Pottstown has done very well, and we hope to keep it that way. I would say if we were to start today and not use opening conditions, I would consider us in Charlie. Despite the low case counts that are in the city of Pottstown or the borough of Pottstown, our county suffers from very low activity in terms of contact tracing. So we're really struggling in that regard right now to snuff out every case as it's identified through a test. And I think that's going to be our really a rate limiting step for how well we get on top of this overall within the county.
Thanks, Dr. Spencer. Next question is, how will Hill ensure that students have complied with off-campus quarantine expectations prior to the arrival of school? I'm going to take this question. We cannot ensure that. Which is why we've asked students and families to sign our health compact, why we've provided really clear guidelines. We are asking you to complete the WAIVE symptom screening twice a day. You will have to be tested, so that's one way we'll know, I guess. And it's a small community, and so if you're out and about, certainly in the Pottstown area, it's likely that some member of our community is going to see you. And if you're out playing club sports or doing some other group activities, it's likely that that word's going to get back to us. And I think as you've seen in our plan, we have really high expectations of our students. We always do. And if someone violates the health compact, it means that they may have to become a remote learner, or they may be suspended from school, or even withdrawn from school. So I hope that we don't have to police this. I hope that everyone understands the value in doing this, and the intrinsic motivation of that. What type of eyewear is provided for students? I shared that earlier image. They're basic safety glasses. We have two versions, one for people who wear eyeglasses, one for those who don't. You'll be provided a case. You'll put your name on these, and you'll carry them around with you throughout the day in your backpack, or students will. There'll be a second set of eyewear provided for lab use in the science building. And again, these are used in certain situations when you're facing each other. We really want to protect transmission of COVID-19 through the eyes. So in breakout groups, if you're in meeting with your college counselor, perhaps in the dining hall, there'll be different situations for that. They're relatively inexpensive. They'll be charged to student accounts. I think they're, with the case, I think they're like $10, and student financial aid will apply. Okay, this is the last set of questions that we've received in advance, and then we'll take questions from the Q&A. So you can start populating the Q&A now if you'd like. Will there be a tuition discount for breakfast and dinner? The answer to that is no. As I shared before, breakfast and dinner have been a courtesy at the Hill. They're not required. At this point, we will not be giving any discount or refund for breakfast and dinner. What is the impact on tuition if a day student chooses to go remote for part or all of the year? And what is the process of switching back? Tom Eccleston is on the call. Tom, do you want to field this question, please?
Yes, thanks, Zach. It's a great question. We've had a few of these already in the last week or two, but if a day student chooses to go remote, they can do so. But there will be no tuition adjustment at that point. And if the process, and this is a medically driven policy, if they want to switch back, they would have to just go through the proper medical protocols to do so.
Right. So they'll have a quarantine, 14-day quarantine before being able to return to the community, and that. But that's you do need to clear that with the admission office and with the dean's office to make sure that we know, and we can plan accordingly.
Yeah, any direct inquiries, just people should email me.
What is the impact on tuition if the school must close? I will field that. So there are two situations under which the school might be required to close. The first is if there's an order from the governor, like there was last spring, closing all schools. We don't expect that, obviously, but we're prepared for that. The other would be if our campus wellness level, by our own opinion, rose to the level of echo. And that could be because we have a large number of cases on campus, or there's an outbreak in Pottstown, and we would hope that any closure would be temporary in nature. So our enrollment contracts do not require a refund for closure or force majeure due to a pandemic. But as those of you who are returning families know, last spring we did make a refund or an adjustment to tuition, and we would consult with our business office and look at the length of the closure and work with our board of trustees to determine what happens in that case. Tom, can day students switch to become boarders?
Right now we're full. Our boarding spots are all full. And again, I've had some families reach out to me. If anyone is curious about this or wants to inquire about it again, I would recommend that they just email me directly and we can chat online about that.
Thanks, Tom. And obviously there are going to be some students who make the decision or have the decision made for them to be remote, some of our international students. And so that could be in flux over the coming months, and we'll keep in touch on that.
Yeah, there's been definitely some fluctuation in enrollment these last few weeks.
All right, I told you you would know when the Q&A would begin, and there's our fluffy friend with a lot of questions. So I'm going to open the Q&A box. I'm going to stop the share right now, And hopefully you can see all of our panelists. And I'm going to open the Q&A. All right. First two questions come from our good friend Grish Vazirani. Hi, Grish. Hope you're doing well. How will droves and flocks be assigned for day students? Mr. Baum or Ms. Zylberg, do you want to respond to that?
Donna, go ahead if you want. I'm fine.
Grish, I saw your comment in the chat. So droves and flocks are not necessarily assigned. They might just be your natural, your lab partner in chemistry will naturally become your partner. Flock. I'm sorry, I'm not quite used to the terminology yet. Your co-curricular will become your herd. So it's not necessarily that we're assigning you to a particular herd or drove, if that makes sense. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ari.
I was just going to say, like, the work that's gone into the reopening plan, it's almost like you wouldn't necessarily know because your day will just be with those people based on what your academics setup is, if you're a boarder, who your roommate is, meaning everything we're doing, we're trying to limit the amount of people, anybody, adult or student, interacts with over the course of a day, which is what any school or organization is reasonably doing during COVID times.
Great. The only specific day student grouping that I could think of, Donna, might be either a carpool or the day student prefect groups that you mentioned before. So those will be assigned, well, the carpools will be assigned by you all with some help from Donna, and the day student prefects will be assigned by Donna and the dean's office. Okay. Next question, how come boarders and day students can't hang out during free time, but can during sports, classes, dining hall, chapel, and advisory? So the premise to that question is that they're going to be hanging out together during sports classes, dining hall, chapel, and advisory, and they won't be. So in all of those contexts, there'll be physical distancing, there'll be masks where appropriate, they'll be in flocks and droves and herds. And so during an unsupervised time, an unstructured time, we have to maintain those contexts and that physical distancing. So that's the answer there. What is the flexibility of day students going remote? Example, can they start the year off remote and join campus 3 weeks later? I think we've answered that, but the answer to that is yes, but you'll have to follow the quarantining and protocols, and there's no changes to tuition. Grish also wants to know, how will typically bigger classes like econ work? Katie, you want to take that question?
Sure, I was actually just typing Grish an answer because I wasn't sure if you were going to go back to that. But we do have a limited sort of selection of larger spaces and a tent, several tents actually, and larger sections will be hosted in those spaces, sections like econ. So some of those will remain fairly large.
Great. For students that begin the year as a remote learner, will there be a virtual orientation for the students? Yes. We'll be including them in our orientation overall. Orientation will be very different this year than it's been in years past. It'll be in small groups, and so we'll participate that way. If a student has to go virtual, what will the effect be on the transcript? No impact on the transcript. We are doing everything we can to not disadvantage a student in any way who's remote. Katie, anything I'm missing there?
No change at all.
Okay, can a student athlete attend college recruiting camps in and out of state during the autumn term? I think if this means athletic college recruiting camp, well, it doesn't really matter. Any kind of college recruiting camp is not permitted at this time. As we said before, we're not allowing club sports or camps of any kind.
Unless you're
Donna,
a remote student though, right, Mr. Lehman? If it's a remote student, then you're not held to the same restrictions. Is that correct?
That's right. If you're a remote student, you can participate as you want. And what I would just say is we remain concerned about the safety of those activities, even for our remote students. And that's why we're discouraging them across the board or restricting them. Donna, a question for you. I understand that there will be assigned seating when the children are in the Ryan Library during free time. Will there be any way for the children to influence where they are seated, ability to be safely distanced close to their friends?
I've gotten this question this past week as well. It's a good one. I think it might depend on the time of day. We anticipate, you know, that time before first period is probably going to be a pretty busy time in the library with a lot of students, where an assigned seat is really going to help us ensure physical distancing. You know, as I look at the academic schedule, if there happens to be a free period with smaller numbers of day students, I can certainly work with students to assign them to a seat that might be more desirable. But I think at the opening of school, we're going to have to be pretty structured with our seating in the library.
All right. How often is the CWL assessed? Is it a daily measure or weekly measure? Kristen.
So we'll keep a close eye on the metrics around the borough and around the county, and of course, what's going on.
Kristen, you're breaking up.
It'll be nearly real-time assessment. We'll report it out daily. Sorry, take that.
I think we missed most of it, but the gist of it is that we are, we'll keep an eye on the metrics all the time. We'll report it out daily and weekly to parents, daily to students, weekly to parents, but we don't expect to see sort of daily fluctuation up and down in that area. It will be a pretty significant deal if the CWL goes in either direction one step. Next question. This is for Ari and Donna. If a day student's first period is free, can they still come to school at the beginning of their next period, or do all day students need to arrive by 8 a.m. for their screening?
That's a really good question. We've actually talked about that scenario. Donna can speak to it as well, but we almost encourage students to come closer to their first commitment of the day and leave as soon as they're able to after their last commitment of the day, just to the different things that Zach has gone through in the plan. So it's realistic. If a student doesn't have first period, I think we want students to try to be on campus a half hour before whatever their first commitment of the day is, just because there might sometimes be some backlog at the CFTA parking lot. And then if you're 20 minutes early for your class, as Donna was saying, you go to your space in the library if you're a day student, because realistically you'll have some downtime that you didn't necessarily plan for before coming to campus each day.
Katie, how would remote learners complete science labs?
We've been working really hard on how remote learners are going to complete science labs. Again, I'll say, fortunately, we are not alone in this search. Jared Courtney, who is the new director of the Quadrivium, has been researching this probably since, I would say, March. So they are purchasing some virtual labs. They are inviting students to watch labs. There are a couple of different models that, depending on the developmental level of the student and depending on the course, that teachers are embracing, but be assured that they will be participating in labs. It's going to look different depending on the student and depending on the class.
Thanks, Katie. I can say my son is an engineering student in college, and he's been remote for 2 semesters now. And you know, they actually send him like a little kit. They send him to Home Depot to buy what he needs to buy, or he watches them live and with the professor and the research assistant doing the labs, and they share the data and that sort of thing. So I think it's going to be a combination of all those things. And I would also say that in our engineering program, which is very popular, especially among our new students, you know, we do have kits, I think, available for students if they're remote that we can get to them so that they can participate remotely on their own. So it'll be a mix. In addition to initial testing for COVID-19, is there a plan to have testing on a periodic basis during the year? Dr. Spencer.
We are monitoring the public health expert guidance and those of some of the governing bodies that deal with residential educational facilities. So at this time, there's really no blanket statement or support for routine surveillance testing. If that guidance changes, we will certainly be on top of that and follow suit. We'll just continue to monitor at this time and remain flexible with that moving forward.
And we will be doing symptomatic testing, and how we'll be doing that is also still a little bit fluid, but certainly students who present with symptoms of COVID-19 or respiratory illness will be tested. Or if you're a day student, we'll ask you to stay at home and go see your primary care physician to be tested. And the next question also for you, Kristen, are children required to get a flu shot?
They are. This year we're instituting a required flu shot. That's really important for the protection of the entire community, especially with the considerable overlap of symptoms between influenza and COVID-19. Now that said, if there's a medical contraindication to the shot for a particular student, or if there's a religious or ethical objection, if that's documented by the primary care provider, then that is an exception that can be granted.
We are also requiring this of all of our employees as well. Do day students who begin as remote learners need to take a COVID-19 test? Dr. Spencer?
Yeah, I would say yes. I would say let's count on everybody having gone through that process as they enter campus for the first time, making sure that we at least have ruled out that initial infected individual who could then bring an infection to the campus. Of course, no testing strategy is perfect. That is just one moment in time when the test is administered. So it does not preclude someone from becoming infected after that. It's not a perfect protection for the campus. It's one small step of everything that we're doing to try to remain healthy on campus.
Okay, we've got to wrap up because we've got another call starting at 7:30. So we'll take these last three questions. So please don't put any more questions in the question box. You can use the form and we'll get back to you. So we'll do rapid fire on these last three questions. Katie, have you determined a plan for vocal groups to ensure the safety of participants?
Yes, we are very close to a plan to ensure their safety.
Great. So a lot of distance.
A lot of distance, a lot of outdoors, a lot of music history and that sort of thing that Una actually really has always wanted to do and hasn't had time. So a good mix.
And probably eyewear thrown in the mix there. If I plan to be a remote student for the whole year and I am a winter athlete, will I be able to participate in my sport without having to board during the H term? The answer to that is no. You will not be able to participate in your winter sport unless you're a boarding student at that time. As I said before, all day students have to come live on campus during that time, and we just can't have people coming and going during the height of flu season. To the extent that we're doing winter sports, which is still up in the air. The day dean, that's Ms. Alberg, mentioned that day students can cultivate their relationships with boarders during classes, chapel, lunch, etc. But the headmaster, that's me, said students will not be socializing in classes, meals, advisory, etc., because they will be distancing and under safety precautions. Why can't there be some accommodations made to provide socialization with precautions? Example, would the ability to meet in a small group and talk while staying 6 feet apart, etc. Appreciate the work done and the necessary precautions. Just want to suggest that these friendships are very important for their mental well-being. I'm going to take that as the last question here. We absolutely understand that, and I don't want you to think that we are, kids are going to be operating completely without any interaction with each other. We're actually taking a lot of precautions, but also a lot of steps to facilitate that kind of engagement in all settings. So they will, they will have to maintain physical distancing. They may have to have their masks they will have to have their masks and goggles on, or glasses on. But there will be interaction, and it will be 6 feet apart. It'll be physically distant. But we recognize that in these cohorts, in these shepherding groups, that there will be more interaction, but it comes with risk. Because if someone in one of those shepherding groups is positive for COVID-19, anyone who has broken that barrier of close contact will also have to quarantine and may get ill, more importantly, may get ill, and may then get their family ill or another cohort ill. And so we're trying to avoid the domino effect, and we're trying to balance that domino effect and the risk with the importance of the relationships, the importance of learning, the importance of being part of a community. And it's not easy to do. And I'm grateful to everyone on this call for understanding that. And I've received so much great communication, supportive communication. Obviously, we all want what's best for our children. We all want what's best for the school. And we all want what's best for our world. And we're trying to accomplish all of those together. So thank you for joining us tonight. As I mentioned before, we'll update the FAQs with some of these questions. Please, if you haven't had a chance to fully read the plan, there's a ton of information in there. Please keep an eye on your email. Complete the required forms, the waiver, the health compact, the August locations, and we'll stay in touch with you over the coming weeks. And we'll keep hoping that the COVID count goes down, both in Pennsylvania and around the world. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon.